Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei. I'm so excited to paint with you again today in our journals for our Watercolor Journal Ideas series. So I am going to be working on another recommendation from the comments. Someone wanted to know more about trees, but not the pine trees that we did earlier, but like deciduous trees, trees with leaves. So we're going to play around with that today. I also have done I did a video maybe a year or 2 years ago that I did some heart-shaped trees that was really fun. And with Valentine's Day coming up, we might throw one of those in there as well. I will do another Valentine's Day themed, something more kind of on the nose in a couple days. But we're going to play with trees today and just have a good time with it. So these are going to be loose, simple, leafy trees, and you can do them in all different colors, whether they're in greens or fall foliage colors if you're in an area where you get lots of fall foliage. And then sometimes trees have beautiful colors like red oak trees have those beautiful, I think they're red oak, beautiful red leaves, dark burgundy color. So anyway, let's get into some trees. So trees can be as simple as you make them. You don't have to overthink it. Let's start with green. And the big thing is whenever you're painting with something like this is to kind of keep it simple and keep thinking about layers. A tree has lots and lots going on in it. It's a whole bunch of individual shapes, so the leaves themselves, and they are layered all on top of each other. So to be able to recreate an essence of depth and layering, you too have to layer, unless you want to keep things really flat, and then it's very illustrative. But so I'm just pulling out some sap green here. I'm using my size 10 Velvet Touch brush. So just a round brush, any round brush that you have will do. And I am going to kind of keep my tree, kind of decide on the shape of the tree. Is it going to be a really tall, narrow tree, a big, wide canopy tree? So I'm going to keep mine kind of in the shape of a traditional tree. And also thinking about this tree is made up, and I drew that very light, you probably can't see it, but this tree is made up of lots of one main trunk and then a handful of other like secondary limbs that are big and thick and wide. And those limbs then break down into lots and lots of smaller limbs and branches, but they'll create these like sections of the tree. So I hope I'm not over explaining this. So I'm just going to start with my round brush and a light wash of green, and I'm just going to start kind of finding my way around. I'm going to leave white space. That's important. As you layer, feel free to leave white space. Sometimes you want to also decide on a light source. So if the sun usually is coming from above, or the top of the tree is going to be slightly lighter than the bottom of the tree. So this bottom part will end up getting more layers and darker layers. And you can see I'm just turning my brush. I'm using the brush to create shapes and textures. All right, so now we have a big blob of green. Fine, that works out. That's kind of starting the shape of the tree, and you can see it's got various values. So there's lighter areas and darker areas. Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to take some darker green. So same color, sap green, I'm using from my core palette, and just pulling in a darker value of that. Less water, more pigment. And I'm just going to start tapping in to some of these areas. Some of that darker color. Okay, so that's giving it a little bit more depth and form. And then I'm also going to pull in a slightly bluer version of this color. So I've taken the sap green, I'm mixing a little phthalo blue into it. So for this really rich velvety green color. And I'm going to focus this mostly on the bottom section. And you see, I have not touched anything with the branch or the trunk or anything like that just yet. Throw a little bit of this up here. And everything is still wet, so wet on wet to get nice soft blends. All right, so now I'm going to go in with a trunk. So let's pick up a brown. I have some raw umber. You can make a brown. The green that you already have in your palette, actually let's make a brown. The green you already have in your palette, if you want to add like alizarin crimson to that, we'll make a nice dark rich chocolatey brown. Look at that. Because if you've missed all of the other videos, we talk a lot, especially the color mixing one. Red and green are opposite each other on the color wheel, and they make brown or gray. So complementary colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel will make a brown or gray or a neutral color. And you can't even get to black. All right, so for our trunk, we're going to just come, we're going to look for the center. I'm going to keep this really simple. And it's a little, trunks are always a little wider at the bottom as they kind of go into the ground. But then I'm going to start to separate some of those branches that we talked about. I'm not going to have one that goes like straight up in, but like those big leading branches. So this one is going to create a section over here. And maybe we even have another one that you see coming out that way. And then you're also going to find that white space and you're going to pop some branches in there. Just the suggestion. You don't have to put them everywhere. And you can let them bleed in. The higher you get, the thinner they get. Try not to overthink this. You can use a smaller brush too, if that works better for you. So now that creates another sense of like texture and depth in there with those branches kind of peeking through. And then you're going to let it dry. And you can always go back in once it dries. If things are too light or you need to touch up or add more branches, you can definitely do that. And then for the trunk of your tree too, the branches that are kind of closest to the canopy are more in shade and won't have as much light on them. If you have a light source, you can paint some shadows onto your trunk so that way you can see areas that are in highlight. It gives it more roundness. So there is a nice little fluffy deciduous tree. And I did this one before where you can paint them, again, use fall colors, use all kinds of colors. But I'm going to do one. I'm going to pull out my magenta. I'm trying to remember how I made this color. I think it was with magenta and some diarrhea yellow. This kind of peachy pink color. So not quite red, not quite magenta like that. Really, really this like slightly diluted red color. reddish pink. And I could even go pull out some more of that magenta, and let me pull in a little green, a little sap green, and dye relied yellow there, so I get an even kind of more muted, kind of a brick color. Yeah, those look nice. All right, so I'm gonna make just a little heart-shaped tree. So same principles apply. We're gonna start light, and then, but I'm just, as I'm creating my tree, I'm gonna make it in the shape of a heart, but trying not to be too rigid with the edges, like on the nose, like hard line heart. Like remembering this is just a tree. We're going to pretend it was like groomed this way or landscaped this way. So it's still a tree. It's still got like little kind of funky edges, parts that stick out. There. And then I'm going to come in, same thing with these darker colors, little green, magenta, I did this one, it was like a folk art, or not even folk art. It was very like a mythical scene. It had a big moon in it. It was on the water. These big heart-shaped trees, very like, it was illustrative, but like ethereal looking. Now I'm gonna go even darker. I'm gonna add a little Payne's gray to this, almost giving it like a purpley color. And then let's put in that same trunk. Let me move my little clippy here. Doo-doo-doo. And same thing, I'm going to give it like a little trunk. Kind of two branches sticking up. And then I am going to use a slightly smaller brush for this. I have a size 3 here just because my white spaces are really tiny. I'm going to put in some of those little tiny branches. Again, you don't have to fill in every gap. And if they're going this way, make sure your branches are kind of all leading in this direction or this direction. Trees grow up and out. Otherwise, if you have a branch like over here going like the total opposite direction, I mean, it can be done, but sometimes it just feels awkward. There we go. And now we have a little heart-shaped tree. So this same concept you can apply to lots of different types of trees. So sometimes trees have completely separate sections where you are, there's a lot of space between things, or they're really tall and there's like little sections that go up. So they can be in lots of different shapes. It doesn't have to just be this like ovaled shape. And I'm just noticing this one is almost an upside down heart shape, and this one is a right side up heart shape. So a lot of trees have this, like they're widest at the base and then they come together at the top. But not all trees are like that. Some of them have lots of different shapes. So go outside, look at a bunch of trees with leaves and look at their different shapes and how they're kind of composed or put together. When you're out on a walk, just start to notice those things and then bring that back into your studio, into your journal practice to say, I noticed that a tree is composed this way. It has lots of big tufts this way, and this is where the branches go. I'm going to use this basic concept of layering in leaves and shadow and build those shapes of trees. All right. Well, thank you so much for painting with me this morning. This was fun. I could definitely fill up lots of journal pages with all different types of trees. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the description of the video for a list of supplies and materials that I use regularly. I've tried to add a few more things that aren't like my regular things, but I use often, like the heat tool, the kneaded erasers, and I'll try to think of other things that I could add to that list that people have been asking about. Bleed proof white, I think I still have to put on there. It might already be on there. But thank you so much. Don't forget to comment if you have questions or want to leave suggestions for future videos. And thanks again for painting with me, y'all.